the US currently has the highest teen pregnancy rate in the developed world. The issue has gotten better over the millennium, as I'll show in a graph later in the presentation. U.S. teen pregnancy rates keep going down, but the U.S. still has the highest teen pregnancy rate in the developed world. And teen pregnancy costs U.S. taxpayers at least $9 billion annually, so it's a very expensive issue. So this just shows teen pregnancy rates based on demographics. So obviously, according to this graph, Hispanics have the highest rate and Asians have the lowest rate. This is from 2000 to 2011, so it's not the most up-to-date, but I think it still provides an interesting picture. And what I found interesting about these graphs is that in America right now, if you look at census data showing which demographic groups are most likely to live in poverty, it tends to be African Americans and Hispanics, and whites and Asians tend to live in less poverty on average. And so what we see from this is that there's a clear correlation between teen pregnancy rates and poverty in the US. So this shows teen pregnancy rates by state. So we have Arkansas and Mississippi in the center with the highest, and sort of on the coasts we have the lowest. The East Coast and the West Coast and the middle of the country seem to have the highest concentrated rates. Now, one thing that should be noted is that teen pregnancy rates can vary significantly from town to town, like even in Massachusetts, which has one of the lowest teen pregnancy rates. There was obviously the whole Gloucester teen pregnancy scandal a couple years ago. This just shows how the rates have kind of ebbed and flowed throughout the millennium. So we see here is like in the 90s, right around the time that I was born, teen pregnancy rates were at an all-time high, and they have descended since then. So the next part of my presentation, I want to discuss media portrayals of teen pregnancy. Now, I think that that's really important because teenagers get a lot of their information about a variety of issues from the media that we consume. Pop culture is deeply ingrained in, I would argue, every aspect of American society. So Glee became an extremely popular show when it came out in 2009. So the first stereotype I want to discuss is the highly religious and allegedly celibate girl next door. So I don't know if you are familiar with Glee, but essentially this character, Quinn Fabray, she is the captain of the cheerleading squad, and she's the president of the celibacy club, and she's like the most popular, most desirable girl in school. And then she gets pregnant, and all of her cheerleader friends basically abandon her, and then she joins the Glee club. So without going on a tangent, that's basically why the reason that I picked this character is because I think she highlights an important archetype with the correlation between religion and teen pregnancy. Because one of the things I found is there's a bunch of studies shown that suggest that highly religious young women are actually more likely to have higher teen pregnancy rates than non-religious women, which I thought was interesting. Second one, freshman band geek. So in The Secret Life of the American Teenager, Amy Juergens is a freshman. She is in the band. She comes from a stable, traditional suburban family. Like everything is fine, and then she gets pregnant, basically. Stereotype 3, the self-assured indie nerd. So Juno is very intelligent, and she does have divorced parents, which is an interesting thing to note. The other two come from traditional nuclear families, but she has a supportive home life. And so what I want to discuss with these three is that Glee, Secret Life of the American Teenager, and Juno all became very popular, but they're largely inaccurate for a number of reasons. One, supportive boyfriends. In real life, 8 out of 10 fathers don't marry the mother of their child. 2, all these characters, even Amy Juergens, who chooses to keep her child, remain in school. Only a third of adolescent mothers will graduate high school, and only slightly over 1% of those will earn a college degree before they turn 30. I also want to just mention that this provides an inaccurate picture of the realities of teen pregnancy, also from a medical perspective, because rarely are things like morning sickness and some of the other medical complexities discussed. They are basically fine, they're functioning just as a normal teenager, they just happen to be pregnant, which is also rather unrealistic. So the second thing I want to just segue into is that in all three of these popular teen pregnancy stereotypes, the young women are from, in the case of the first one, Quinn Fabray, she's supposed to be wealthy, but the other two are from solid middle-class families, relatively traditional families, and they're also white, which doesn't necessarily paint the most accurate picture of what the average, or what many people who become pregnant might experience. Because, for one thing, children of teen mothers are much more likely to become teen mothers themselves, and there's a number of studies that suggest that children from broken or untraditional families who don't have strong support systems are more likely to become pregnant. So, young women born into unfortunate circumstances have less opportunities than wealthier teens. So, one, we might ask ourselves, so how does that correlate with teen pregnancy? Well, what I would argue is that it has to do with exposure. That if everyone you know is, has been a teen mother or knows someone that's a teen mother, it starts to seem normal, and there starts to be less sources of uplifting. So they're less likely to have adequate information about and access to proper measures of contraception because, again, it comes back to money, and also just resources, and they're more likely to have self-esteem issues. Many psychologists and social workers believe that teens who experience despair, rather from traumatic family circumstances or just bad environmental circumstances, are more likely to turn to motherhood as sort of a coping mechanism. And please, if I'm moving too fast, just let me know. So I'm going to go off a tad bit of a tangent here and talk about teen pregnancy and live theater, which seems irrelevant, but I promise I have a point. So a couple of years ago, there was a play, Milk Like Sugar, which premiered at the Playwrights Horizons, which is like a playwrights festival in New York City, by Kirsten Greenidge, and it follows three African-American teens who decided to get pregnant and raise their babies together, and it was allegedly based on the teen pregnancy pact that occurred in Gloucester a couple of years ago. It starts out as being relatively carefree, but it's later revealed that this is partially due to to the fact that they don't see particularly bright futures for themselves. And the reason that I wanted to mention this is because although it's a play with fictional circumstances, I think that it brings up an important point about how resources affect this issue. So finally, I just want to mention a couple things about medical risks with teen pregnancy. I've talked a lot about the social aspect, but there's also the scientific aspect. So teens are less likely to receive proper prenatal care because many of them hide their pregnancies or are in denial until sometimes up to the third trimester. So they're less likely to be taking things like prenatal vitamins and other things that are necessary. They're more likely to give birth to premature and or low birth weight babies. So essentially, from a medical perspective, their children are starting off life from a worse place than perhaps they would in the case of older mothers. They're more likely to experience postpartum depression than older mothers. This could, I'm not a medical expert, but basically what scholars say is that this could be explained to feelings of social isolation, the fact that, having a baby is hard, pregnancy is hard. They don't have other people their age who can relate to them, who they can lean on for support, in most cases at least. And finally, more likely to experience feelings of isolation, which can, and as I can say from personal experience, isolation can lead to a number of medical problems such as, weight gain, weight loss. It goes back to the whole depression thing. So, my proposed solution, finally. So after doing months of research and trying to really look at the issue from multiple angles, I read a number of articles on sort of how this affects different areas, different demographic groups, etc. I think comprehensive health classes are important, but that is not enough. I think that what is necessary to really turn the issue around is presenting students with accurate data on the state of teen pregnancy and how it may impact life outcomes, showing them videos, engaging them in discussions about what they want to do, and being more honest with students about how it might impact their futures. In America, we want to believe that we're the land of opportunity and the land where anything is possible. So I think that as a society, we don't want to tell people that there are limitations. However, as I said before, less than 1% of teen mothers earn a college degree, and a college degree is becoming more and more necessary in the world that we live in today. So things like these discussions, I think, are the first step to solving the problem. And finally, I want to mention that the problem is not just about lack of information. It also comes from larger problems like educational inequality, poverty, and lack of opportunities for young women born to unfortunate circumstances. When we start to solve these issues as a nation, we will become closer to decreasing our teen pregnancy rate and hopefully no longer being the nation with the highest teen pregnancy rate in the developed world. Thank you very much. Are there any questions?
I can ask some. I have a few.
Okay.
But you mentioned that you think it's correlating with the poverty
Yes.
level. Okay. And I'm wondering, when you compare the poverty, say, like with the pregnancy rate with Japan, is it the same in Japan, that the poor in Japan are the ones getting pregnant?
Yes. So I looked at that. I looked at the teen pregnancy rate in other states, and pretty much everywhere in the world, poor young women are more likely to become teen mothers. But I think it also has to do with culture. That I don't. My knowledge of Japan is relatively limited, but from what I know, there is a great deal of emphasis on things like academics, and I think that when certain values are instilled in a society, it affects that. So I don't know if that answers the question.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And then one thing I know too is, you picked 3 particular examples of teen pregnancy that teens are seeing on TV. What about MTV's show that I think shows a much different side of the examples you were showing?
Right.
Pregnant at like 12 or whatever that I'm joking.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
like pregnant at like 14.
Right.
What is the name of it? Remember?
Teen Mom?
No.
Oh.
There's a show on MTV where it's literally called
16 and Pregnant?
16 and Pregnant, yeah.
Yes. So I did a lot of research on Teen Mom. Teen Mom is more accurate than like television or media, but it still provides an incomplete picture because, for one thing, none of the girls are living in poverty, which is the case quite often with teen pregnancies in America. And additionally, a lot of them, the fathers are somehow involved in the children's lives. Some of them even have like televised weddings. So what I would say the problem with that is that it doesn't necessarily show the other components of how it affects their life prospects, because most of them are not living in poverty. And yeah. So I don't know if that answers the question.
I got more, but you guys can chime in.
Yeah, a couple. Yeah, so a couple of things were interesting to me, and maybe wonder, like, for example, the bit on religion. You mentioned that the highly religious are more likely. Did you explore that at all, as far as like what the connection is there?
Yeah.
How that's explained?
What I discovered, in my research, is that certain religious groups experience higher teen pregnancy rates than others. What I think that, if I remember correctly, just from the top of my head, I read this article that said that highly religious Christians tend to experience the highest teen pregnancy rates, and oddly enough, that Jews tend to experience the lowest teen pregnancy rates in America. Obviously, it varies significantly within the world at large, but so yeah, it seems to me from my research that part of it is that in certain more conservative religions, they aren't always like taught comprehensive information, so therefore that's what it really comes back to. And I've also read a number of real life stories of teen moms, and what they often say is things like, I knew something about contraception, but I just wasn't really informed, because I think, like, although Newton does a pretty good job, that I wasn't actually here freshman year, but from what I can tell, does a pretty good job of, providing comprehensive information. Newton's also a relatively progressive community, and other communities in America still tend to censor a lot of that vital information. But I mean, I should say as a disclaimer, that's a larger issue for another day, but it's related, I think.
I'll be one
I was just gonna ask, what drew you to this topic?
Mhm.
Because you seem
Yeah.
pretty passionate about it.
So I have a cousin who became a teen mom a couple years ago. My family is from, most of my family is from Pennsylvania. Like my great-grandfather was a coal miner, so we didn't necessarily come from a lot of money, and so there are a lot of people in my family that have experienced that. Because my mom was sort of the first one. She went to college in Boston. She was sort of the first one to break away from that, but I know a lot of people in my life that have experienced that. So I would say, and I've watched how it has shaped their life prospects. So that's sort of what drew me to the issue.
Did you look at all at stats or think at all about how sometimes the cycle repeats
Mm-hmm.
in perhaps in
Definitely.
families or in cultures? Because that's something I spend a lot of time thinking about. How do we break that?
Yeah, and that's part of what the play Milk Like